The United Nations scientific advisors have stopped short of labelling the Great Barrier Reef in danger, but argued the reef still remains under serious threat. In a report, UNESCO said Australia had taken positive steps to protect the reef in a decision welcomed by the Albanese government.
The policies of the former coalition government failed to protect the reef. My government is getting on with the job and we're making up for lost time.
It is recommended the government provide a progress report on the reef in February before it's considered for the in danger list again next year.
Every coral reef in the world is in danger from climate change. There's now a government in Australia that is acting on climate change, and that's the biggest difference that UNESCO has identified as well.
And joining us live for more is Dr. Lissa Schindler, Great Barrier Reef Campaign Manager at the Australian Marine Conservation Society. Lissa, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. Just explain for us, what is actually the significance of being on that list? What does it really mean in practical terms? Why was the government so keen to avoid the reef going onto it?
So the government sees the in danger list as an embarrassment. Most World Heritage sites that go on the in danger list are really from developing nations who are unable to manage their World Heritage sites. And that's why the Australian government always fights it when it does come up, because this has been going on for a decade in terms of reef management, that it is really seen as embarrassment. But it's important to realise that this is also, in danger listing is to sound the alarm on sites that are under threat, and the Great Barrier Reef definitely still remains under threat.
Well, how would you characterise the health or otherwise of the Great Barrier Reef?
I think the Great Barrier Reef has actually had a recovery period. We've had this sort of, I guess I would call it the eye of the storm, where there's been some bleaching occurring, but it hasn't been very severe. We haven't seen that high mortality, and there's been some growth back of corals, but those corals have been those sort of fast-growing species that are the first to be hit by bleaching events. What we're very worried about is the upcoming summer. There's a predicted El Nino. We're still waiting for the Bureau of Meteorology to call it, but we're in for a hot summer, and corals will likely come under a lot of heat stress over this summer period.
We heard a bit earlier the government saying that its policies are changed now, there are changed settings, and that there are positive steps, they describe them, in place to do better, to manage the reef better. What are those key changes, and what else would you like to see on the list?
I think that they have taken positive steps, and the reason why UNESCO hasn't recommended an in danger listing this year is because of those steps. So the government has really done a good job in terms of addressing fisheries concerns of UNESCO, but other concerns remain. So whilst the ALP have strengthened their climate policy, it's not enough. It's still, they need to go higher. They need to really be aiming for emission reduction targets of 75% by 2030, not 43%. Coral reefs are very sensitive to temperature, and we need to be limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees across the globe, and Australia needs to do its fair share in doing this, especially as a developed nation.
We've just been showing our viewers some beautiful pictures of the reef with some gorgeous fish and turtles and the marine life there. How are the marine life on the reef coping?
It's important to understand that the Great Barrier Reef is really big. It's 2,300 kilometres, and there is still a lot of healthy reef left. The problem is that as climate change worsens, we will see these bleaching events coming more regularly, and it will give less time for the Great Barrier Reef to recover. And that's where the worry is, that they won't have that recovery period. So over the last few years, it's had quite a strong recovery period, but as temperatures increase, that window will get less and less.
Dr. Schindler, really appreciate you joining us. Thanks so much for your time.